Good to see you all. Okay, so I'm Lucy Shea, as Dylan so wonderfully introduced me. Thank you, Dylan. And before I'm joined by the panelists, these amazing women with deep expertise in how social media influences change hearts and minds, if you're thinking, but hang on, I know social media, and it's all about the ketchup challenge and the ice bucket challenge, and what on earth has it got? Why is GreenBiz talking about it? We're just going to spend a moment on what the latest report from IPCC tells us. So I'm Lucy Shea, I'm the CEO of Futera, and I came to this, I started out pretty early on as a mini campaigner on fair trade. I have vivid memories of standing by the lockers at school and pulling out the contraband leaflets before putting them all around school. But I was following in the footsteps of my mum, who kind of a teacher and did this in her spare time. But I had no idea you could actually do jobs in this area. So fresh out of college, when I read about corporate responsibility, I thought, that's it. You can actually put together your passion for change with earning a living. And there'll be more on that in a moment. On to why social media influences. Well, the latest IPCC report, Annual Report 6, Chapter 5, gave us a new set of solutions in tackling climate change. And one of them was consumer behaviour change. And they told us that rapidly we can see a reduction of 5% in global greenhouse gas emissions by enabling consumer behaviour change. Now, 5% is huge. Aviation is about 2% every year. So you can see these numbers are really going to add up. But how do we enable consumer behaviour change? And after 2 decades of working on this, on sustainable lifestyles, as one of the founder members of the UN Task Force on Sustainable Lifestyles at Futera, well, it's very clear that people are influenced by other people around them, by their friends and family, by people like them. So if you're looking at veganism or, encouraging those take-up of EVs or cutting single-use plastics, whatever it may be, it's friends and family that influence us most, way more than brands or business or government or institutions. And what it turns out is that creators and social media influencers are in that same bucket. They're in that same bubble of people like us. So research from Ipsos and Unilever say that 83% of consumers think that TikTok and Instagram are good places to find advice on sustainable lifestyles. Lots of other research to back that up. So the IPCC validates this as well. It says that creators and social media influencers can really help drive adoption of sustainable lifestyles and behaviours, but also the adoption of low-carbon technologies, that they can shift the Overton window, if you like, of what is acceptable and enable this rapid take-up of decarbonisation. Creators want to do more. We'll come back to this in our panel. But just to say, if you look around, if you think that it's around sustainability and lifestyle change, creators can also help drive adoption of low carbon technology. So these are some stills for a campaign that we ran with Fortescue, sparking outrage around fossil fuel subsidies and encouraging the take-up of renewables, and with incredible reach and outreach. So now, welcome to the stage, if you could put your hands together for our fantastic panelists who are going to join me in exploring what it is, how social media creators can change hearts and minds. Fantastic. Okay, and that's everyone's handles there as well. So, Leah, to you first. You have done so much to embed narratives around environmental justice, climate optimism. Now, Leah is I'm sure you all know Leah and Zahra, who I'll come to next. Leah is the founder and board chair of the Intersectional Environmentalist. She's an author, in fact, both authors. We'll talk about the books towards the end. And has huge following on her Instagram account. And the book, Leah's book, is called The Intersectional Environmentalist, How to Dismantle Systems of Oppression to Protect People and Planet. And Leah's been honoured on many lists, including the Ebony Power 100, Time 100 Next, Insider's Climate Action 30. So can you break it down for us to start with? What is a creator and what is an influencer? Are they the same thing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to be here. That word has a different meaning for different people, but for me in particular, I studied environmental science and policy, and then I worked in corporate sustainability and realized that the climate movement had a really serious communications problem where only people who were environmentalists kind of knew what we were talking about. So I wanted to experiment with social media to see if I could create culturally competent resources to get people activated about environmental justice and really popularize intersectional approaches to environmentalism by way of social media. So a creator can be a person that creates content, sometimes about fashion, sometimes about environmentalism, in my case, the very niche intersection of intersectional environmentalism.
Oh, that's great. And in your experience, and as you've really kind of done a lot to build this market, if you like, what can you give us some advice? Like, what makes a successful creator campaign? If folks in the audience or watching the live stream are thinking about engaging in this area, what makes it work? What are some tips?
I would say the most effective social media campaigns that I've done with brands or foundations are ones that are rooted in wealth redistribution. So being able to show how a brand or a company is actually making a difference by supporting grassroots environmental initiatives. We can talk about a product and how sustainable it is, and that will target a really specific demographic of people who just likes to geek out about sustainable manufacturing. But if you really want to make an impact, I would say partnering with grassroots environmental organizations, and then also having content that's not just about the product, which I know for folks who are selling product are probably looking at me like, we can't talk about the product. But it's really important to have something that can really showcase the people that you're working with. So if you're working with an activist, talk about the work that they do. If you're working with a creator, talk about what makes them really special and how that relates to an overall campaign.
I think that's key because there's so much. There's such legislation now around greenwashing, anti-greenwashing, which is welcome. But the risk is that everyone goes into green hush and stops talking about this just at the moment that we need, as you said, this thing to be talked about more. And actually talking about the people behind it and working with creators rather than just the product is a fantastic way of avoiding greenwash as well. So I think that's really smart. Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Leah, but now let's introduce Zahra Biabani. And Zahra has also built a huge following on email and Instagram, is also an author, and Zahra's book is Climate Optimism, Climate Wins and Creating Systemic Change Around the World. It's just been out a year. So Zahra's been a youth climate activist and entrepreneur and is now the CEO of a company called In the Loop AI. So Zahra, over to you. Tell us about how you got into this space, and then I'm going to ask you for how not to do it. So you can give us some examples or just areas where it can go wrong when brands and creators work together.
Yeah, totally. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you, GreenBiz. So I got into this space, was in college and was feeling a lot of that existential doom about the climate. This was during the pandemic, and was kind of really feeling a lot of that existentialism. And so I decided to start looking for instances or stories of climate wins, grassroots organizations actually on the ground that were experiencing successes, and that took off in terms of sharing on social media because a lot of people also resonated with it. So at its core, just finding something I was seeking and sharing it with the world, and seeing how it stuck there. In terms of a bad campaign, I think Leah, I'm sure you agree with the phenomenon of during Earth Month or the beginning of April, our inboxes start to get a little full out of nowhere with a lot of big ticket offers from companies that seem to not really have a clear ask in a campaign. And I think the idea of a campaign or an activation too indicates a notion of something that's, a finite time bound, but obviously, tackling climate change and whatever goals that an activation really has around climate change should be really clear in what they're looking to do as a company with decarbonization, what their product or services is looking to do in reducing emissions. And so I think one of the fundamental flaws in campaigns that I often see is, one, not a clear ask. Two, a lack of context around the facts that they're trying to put forth, putting a lot of the responsibility of the creators to find out all the facts. And while it is part of the job, I think a lot of it is on the brands to control, what they're trying to get out of this. And so the creators can say, hey, is this something I want to be a part of, or is this greenwashing? And then third, the lack of responsibility of engaging with communities, like Leah said. We were both part of that Tazo campaign that was really successful in part because they so artfully engaged the community and also engaged with nonprofits in the space. So I would say those are kind of the three things of a unsuccessful campaign in my experience.
Thank you, that's fantastic. And we hear this a lot when we work with creators, that this fear of getting called out or greenwashing by accident, or so there's some fear from the creator community about being taken advantage of, I think, by working with brands. And equally, I think you get some fear from brands that creators will say something that they weren't ready for them to say. So I think there's some great pieces to call out. Now, Leah, before I go back to you, Zahra, you now actually run your own company, and I think you've learnt from your social media experience, and you use some of those insights to power your company. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. I think brands and companies, when they're trying to engage with creators, there's a kind of a set, there's stories on Instagram, there's posts, there's reels, whatever, TikToks, but there's a lot more kind of untapped deliverables that I think should be tapped into. For example, say X person is a creator in the climate space, they have 100,000 followers. They also know the demographics of these followers. They know how they're engaging with their content, where they live, what gender they are, all of these things. And they have access to, or the ability to survey these people on what issues they really care about, how they're thinking about the climate crisis, or anything that is relevant to a brand and a company's campaign. And so basically using creators as ways to disseminate surveys or learn more about a demographic, I think is really undertapped. And that for me was really how I transitioned into running a B2B business, is really learning about the pain points in my industry through kind of a consumer outreach, and then translating that into, okay, well, how can I build a business off this? Because the key tenets of a business is, what's the problem, who's facing it, how big is it, what's the alternatives to it? So you can kind of find out all of those things through surveys. So I really encourage any brands or companies in the space to really engage with creators through, again, surveys.
Yeah. And on that piece around building capacity in the creator community, we're working with a number of brands on a thing called the Ignite Coalition, which is aiming for those creators that want to do more, skill up, raise capacity. But we work with you on the Earth Alliance Fund. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because that's another way of building deeper connections with creators.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting because the goal wasn't just to work with climate creators.
Yeah.
The goal was to teach any creator, and there's micro creators, so they call them micro influencers, people who have less than 10,000 followers, who sometimes are actually more effective at communicating with their communities and have higher engagement, to some of those larger creators who have 100,000 followers and more, to utilize their platform, whatever they're talking about, to teach people about climate education. And then we also had a really fun contest that I got to be a judge on, where any person who is creating content could pitch an idea about environmentalism and get funding. So I thought that was such an amazing program that I hope comes back one day to kind of incentivize creators to talk about environmentalism in a way that's really accessible and culturally competent for their communities.
And that, I think that last point is key about this. It's really important to work with the greenfluencers, if you like, but bringing the whole wider, lifestyles, beauty, creator community into this is where we're going to win in terms of those changing hearts and minds. So just to wrap up, I think you might have heard a plug. Buy the books. They're really good. I can highly recommend both Leah and Zahra's books. If you're looking for a shot of climate optimism, I really recommend checking out Leah and Zahra's Instagram feeds as well, around the weekly wins, and I loved your piece around easy bread and butter pickles.
Oh yeah.
Loved that. Just lifestyle hacks and big policy change and all of it. At Futerra, we will shortly be publishing a guide on how to successfully engage with creators on sustainability, and also look out for that Ignite Coalition, where lots of us are coming together to work together on this. So thank you. Warm round of applause for such great input. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.